Sarah Mitchell stood in line at the grocery store, her cart half empty despite having walked every aisle twice. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma stood beside her, unusually quiet, clutching a worn, stuffed reindeer that had seen better Christmases. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the tired faces of last-minute shoppers scrambling for holiday essentials 3 days before Christmas. The line moved slowly, each person ahead unloading carts filled with hams, fresh vegetables, boxes of cookies, and wrapped presents. Sarah's cart held a small chicken, a bag of potatoes, some carrots, and a box of pasta. Nothing festive. Nothing that screamed Christmas dinner. Just enough to get them through the next few days until her paycheck arrived, which wouldn't come until after the holiday. Emma's small voice broke through Sarah's thoughts. Mom is not coming this year. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked down at her daughter's upturned face, those big brown eyes full of innocent concern. Emma wasn't asking out of greed or disappointment in gifts. She was asking because she'd noticed everything. The lack of decorations in their small apartment. The way Sarah had changed the subject every time Christmas was mentioned. The absence of the usual excitement that had filled previous years. Sarah knelt down, ignoring the people behind them in line. She tucked a strand of Emma's brown hair behind her ear and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course, coming, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Emma shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her sneakers that were half a size too small squeaking against the linoleum floor. Jenny at school said only comes to kids whose families have Christmas trees and lots of food. She said knows when people can't afford presents, so he doesn't waste his time. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Jenny Richardson, the daughter of the wealthiest family in their small town of Creek. Of course she would say something like that. Sarah wanted to be angry, but she knew it wasn't really Jenny's fault. The girl was just repeating what she'd probably overheard at home, not understanding the cruelty of such words. That's not true at all, Sarah said firmly, loud enough that a few nearby shoppers glanced their way. Comes to all good children who believe in him, and you, my sweet girl, are the best child could hope to visit. Emma's face brightened slightly, but doubt still lingered in her eyes. Then why don't we have a tree? Or lights? Mrs. Henderson's house has lights all around her windows, and Michael's family has a huge tree they can see from the street. Sarah stood up slowly, her knees protesting from too many double shifts at the diner where she worked. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that the choice wasn't between having Christmas decorations or not having them, but between having decorations and having electricity for the next month? How could she make Emma understand that the $5 for a small tree was the same $5 that would buy her lunch for 3 days at school? We're having a simpler Christmas this year, Sarah said, hoping her voice sounded more convincing than she felt. Sometimes the best Christmases aren't about big trees or fancy decorations. They're about being together and being grateful for what we have. Even as the words left her mouth, Sarah hated how hollow they sounded. She'd been telling herself the same thing for weeks, trying to make peace with the fact that this Christmas would be nothing like the ones Emma deserved. Nothing like the ones Sarah had dreamed of giving her daughter when Emma was born. The line moved forward, and they shuffled along with it. Sarah could feel eyes on them, could sense the pity from the woman behind her who had probably overheard every word. She wanted to shrink into herself, to disappear from this fluorescent-lit judgment. Next, the cashier called, her voice flat and disinterested. Sarah began unloading her meager items onto the conveyor belt. The chicken looked small and sad under the bright lights. The potatoes were loose because buying the bag was 10 cents more expensive than getting them individually. Everything about their purchase screamed poverty, screamed struggling, screamed failure. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Dolers who Sarah recognized from previous visits, rang up each item with mechanical efficiency. $32.47, she announced, her eyes not quite meeting Sarah's. Sarah pulled out her wallet, the leather cracked and worn. She'd counted and recounted her money that morning. She had exactly $40 to last until her paycheck. $32.47 for groceries would leave her with $7.53, enough for gas to get to work and back for the next 3 days. Enough to buy Emma a small gift, maybe a coloring book from the dollar store and some crayons. Not enough for Christmas magic, but enough to survive. She handed over 2 $20 bills, and as Dolers counted out her change, Sarah felt Emma tug on her coat. "Mom, can I have a candy cane?" Emma pointed to the display of holiday candy near the register. "They're only 50 cents. Sarah's heart broke a little more. 50 cents. Such a small amount. Such an easy yes in a normal life. But this wasn't a normal life, and 50 cents might be the difference between being able to afford something for Emma's stocking or having it remain empty. "Not today, baby," Sarah said softly, taking her change from dollars. "Maybe next time." Emma's face fell, but she didn't argue. She never argued. She never threw tantrums in stores or demanded things they couldn't afford. Sometimes Sarah wished she would, because then at least she could act like a normal kid instead of this too-wise-for-her-age little girl who understood struggle in a way no 7-year-old should. Sarah grabbed her single bag of groceries, and they turned to leave. That's when she heard the voice behind them, deep and warm, with a slight southern accent that spoke of sweet tea and front porch sitting. "Excuse me, miss, I think you dropped this." Sarah turned to find a man standing there, probably in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore jeans and a plain blue flannel shirt under a worn brown jacket. Nothing fancy, nothing that suggested wealth, but his face held something Sarah hadn't seen in a long time: genuine kindness without pity. He held out a $50 bill. Sarah stared at it, confused. "That's not mine, I didn't drop anything." The man's smile deepened, creating more lines around his eyes. "Are you sure? I could have sworn I saw it fall from your purse when you were getting your wallet out." Sarah glanced at her purse, then back at the man. She knew for certain she hadn't dropped any money. She'd had exactly $40, and she'd used it all. There was no way a $50 bill had been in her possession to drop. "I'm certain that's not mine," Sarah said, though something in the man's expression made her pause. "You should keep it or turn it into customer service." The man looked down at Emma, who was staring at the money with wide eyes. Then he looked back at Sarah, and his expression grew more serious. "Ma'am, I'm pretty sure this fell out of your purse. It would be a shame not to take what's yours, especially this close to Christmas." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She understood what was happening. This was charity. This was pity. This was a stranger trying to give her money because he'd overheard her daughter asking about and seen their pathetic grocery haul. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle to maintain the last shreds of her dignity. But another part of her, the practical part that had learned to swallow pride for Emma's sake, was calculating what $50 could mean. It could mean a small tree from the lot down the street that was selling them cheap to get rid of inventory. It could mean a few small gifts under that tree. It could mean a Christmas that didn't feel like complete failure. "I really don't think," Sarah began, but Emma interrupted. "Mom, maybe you did drop it. You were really worried about counting the money. Maybe it fell out and you didn't notice." The man knelt down to Emma's level, and his smile was genuine. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she said quietly, hugging her stuffed reindeer. "That's a beautiful name. I had an aunt named Emma. She was the kindest person I ever knew." He glanced up at Sarah. "Your daughter reminds me of her, same gentle spirit." Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back rapidly. She couldn't fall apart in the middle of the grocery store. She'd held it together this long, through so many humiliations and struggles, and she wouldn't break now. The man stood and pressed the $50 bill into Sarah's hand, closing her fingers around it before she could protest. "Please," he said quietly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Let me do this. I've been where you are. I know what it's like to count every penny and still come up short. I know what it's like to watch your child's face fall when they realize Christmas might not come. Someone helped me once, long ago, and I promised myself I'd pay it forward when I could." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw no judgment there, no superiority, just human understanding and compassion. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," he said, stepping back. He nodded to Emma. "You take care of your mama, Emma, and don't worry about he's definitely coming this year." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Sarah had seen in days. "Really?" "Really," the man confirmed. "In fact, I happen to know's working extra hard this year to make sure he gets to all the good kids, especially the ones who've been patient and kind." He gave them a small wave and walked back toward the front of the store, not waiting for further thanks or acknowledgement. Sarah watched him go, clutching the $50 bill like a lifeline. "See, Mom," Emma said, tugging on her coat again. "I told you was coming, that man knew." Sarah looked down at her daughter's hopeful face and managed a real smile this time. "You're right, sweetheart. I guess I should have had more faith." They walked out into the cold December air, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt something other than despair. It wasn't much. $50 wouldn't solve all their problems or erase the mountain of bills waiting at home. But it was enough to give Emma a Christmas. It was enough to restore a little bit of magic to a season that had felt impossibly dark. As they drove home in their old with the temperamental heater, Emma chattered excitedly about and Christmas morning, all her earlier doubts forgotten. Sarah half listened, her mind already planning. She'd go to the tree lot tomorrow during her break. She'd hit the thrift store for gifts. She'd make it work. Their apartment was on the second floor of an old building on the edge of town, the kind of place where the radiator clanked all night and the walls were thin enough to hear every conversation from neighboring units. Sarah unlocked the door, and they stepped into the small space that had been home for the past 2 years. The apartment was clean but sparse. A worn couch that had come from a yard sale, a small TV on a milk crate, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs. Emma's room was the only space Sarah had tried to make special, with curtains Sarah had sewn herself and a bookshelf stocked with library books and a few precious volumes from thrift stores. Sarah put away the groceries while Emma sat at the table, drawing pictures with stubbed crayons. The $50 bill sat on the counter, and Sarah kept glancing at it as if afraid it might disappear if she looked away too long. "What are you drawing?" Sarah asked, trying to focus on the moment rather than the endless list of worries that usually occupied her mind. "Workshop," Emma said, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on coloring in a large building with windows. "He's probably really busy right now getting everything ready." Sarah moved to look over Emma's shoulder. The drawing showed and several elves surrounded by toys. In the corner, Emma had drawn a little girl who was clearly meant to be herself, complete with the stuffed reindeer. "That's beautiful, honey," Sarah said, kissing the top of Emma's head. "'S lucky to have such talented kids believing in him." Emma looked up, her expression suddenly serious. "Mom, was that man in the store one of his helpers?" Sarah paused, considering the question. In a way, wasn't he exactly that? "Maybe he was," she said carefully. "Sometimes has helpers all over the place, making sure Christmas happens for everyone." "I thought so," Emma said with satisfaction, returning to her drawing. "He had nice eyes like would have." That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, working out a budget for the $50. Her regular expenses were calculated down to the penny, but this was extra. This was Christmas. $20 for a tree. She'd seen small ones at the lot for that price. $10 for lights, the cheap kind from the discount store. That left $20 for gifts. She could get a stuffed animal, maybe a small doll, a coloring book, some candy for the stocking. Nothing extravagant, but enough to put under the tree. Enough to make Christmas morning feel real. Sarah allowed herself a moment of gratitude for the stranger in the grocery store. She didn't even know his name, would probably never see him again, but he'd given her something more valuable than money. He'd given her hope. The next morning, Sarah woke Emma early. "Get dressed. We're going shopping before I have to go to work." Emma's eyes went wide. "Shopping for Christmas." "For Christmas," Sarah confirmed, feeling a spark of excitement she hadn't expected to feel this year. They drove to the tree lot, where a tired-looking man was clearly eager to sell off his remaining inventory. The trees that were left were sparse and imperfect, but Sarah found one that wasn't too bad, about 4 feet tall with a few bare patches that could face the wall. $20, the man said, barely glancing at it. Sarah handed over the money, and he helped her secure the tree to the roof of her car with twine. Emma bounced in the passenger seat, pressing her face against the window to look up at their tree. Next stop was the discount store, where Sarah quickly grabbed a strand of lights and a small box of ornaments. $12 total. She was already over budget, but seeing Emma's joy made it impossible to care about the math. "Can we decorate it tonight?" Emma asked as they loaded everything into the car. "After dinner," Sarah promised. "But right now I need to drop you at Mrs. and get to work." Mrs. was their elderly neighbor who watched Emma for a minimal fee, more out of companionship than any real need for income. She was a godsend, and Sarah thanked whatever forces had placed such a kind woman in the apartment next door. Sarah's shift at the diner was long and exhausting. The lunch rush was filled with holiday parties and families going out for special meals before Christmas. She smiled and served and refilled coffee cups, all while her feet ached and her back protested. But every time she thought about the tree waiting at home, about Emma's face when they would decorate it together, she found the energy to keep going. During her break, Sarah walked to the thrift store 2 blocks away. She had $18 left, and she needed to make it count. The store was picked over, as it always was this close to Christmas, but Sarah had learned to be resourceful. She found a stuffed penguin with a slightly wonky eye for $3, a puzzle of a winter scene for $2, a book about a girl who could talk to animals for $1, a set of hair ribbons for 50 cents, a small box of chocolates near the register for $2. It wasn't much, but wrapped up and placed under the tree, it would look like Christmas. That left her with $9.50. Sarah stood in the store calculating. She needed to save at least $5 for gas. That left $4.50 for anything else. Then she saw it, a small wooden box with a painted snowflake on the lid, sitting on a shelf behind the counter. When she asked to see it, the cashier told her it was a music box. Wind it up and it played Silent Night. "How much?" Sarah asked, already knowing it would probably be too expensive. "Tag says $5, but it's been here a while. I'll take $4 for it." Sarah's hand tightened around the bills in her pocket. $4 would leave her with 50 cents until payday. 50 cents for any emergency, any unexpected expense, any tiny catastrophe that always seemed to strike at the worst possible time. But Emma loved music. When she was little, Sarah used to sing to her every night. They didn't do that as much anymore, too tired from the daily struggle to survive. But Emma still hummed to herself sometimes, making up little songs about whatever she was thinking about. "I'll take it," Sarah said, handing over the $4 before she could change her mind. By the time she left work and picked up Emma from Mrs., it was nearly dark. They carried the tree up the stairs together, Emma insisting on helping even though her small hands could barely grip the trunk. Sarah propped it up in the corner of their living room, securing it in the ancient tree stand she'd found at a yard sale years ago. They strung the lights together, Emma carefully handing each section to Sarah to wrap around the branches. The ornaments came next, colorful glass balls that caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. It wasn't a fancy tree, and their tiny living room looked even smaller with it taking up corner space. But to Sarah, it was beautiful. Emma stepped back, her hand in Sarah's, and they admired their work. The tree glowed softly, turning their shabby apartment into something magical. "It's perfect," Emma breathed. "Mom, it's the most beautiful tree ever." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, fighting back tears. "It really is, isn't it?" That night, after chicken and potatoes for dinner, after Emma's bath and bedtime story, Sarah sat alone wrapping the small collection of gifts in newspaper comics, because she couldn't afford wrapping paper. She worked carefully, making each package as neat as possible, trying to make up in presentation what she lacked in expensive gifts. The music box was the last thing she wrapped. As she wound it up and listened to Silent Night play softly in the quiet apartment, Sarah finally let herself cry. Not from sadness, exactly, but from a release of all the tension and fear she'd been carrying. They would have Christmas. It wouldn't be elaborate or impressive, but it would be real. Emma would wake up to presents under a tree, would believe in for at least one more year. Sarah placed all the wrapped gifts under the tree, arranging them to look like more than they were. She stood back, tilting her head, trying to see it through Emma's eyes. Would it be enough? Would her daughter understand someday why some Christmases were lean and others leaner still? A soft sound made her turn. Emma stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed reindeer, her hair messy from sleep. "I thought you were asleep," Sarah said, quickly wiping her eyes. Emma walked over and hugged her mother's waist. "I heard music." Sarah picked her up, even though Emma was getting too big for it really, and held her close. "Do you like our tree?" Emma nodded against her shoulder. "I knew would come, that man at the store promised." Sarah thought about the stranger again, wondering who he was, what had motivated him to help them. "Do you know what I think?" Sarah said softly. "I think maybe people can be angels sometimes. Maybe that man was our angel." "Maybe," Emma agreed. "Can I stay up with you a little longer?" They sat together on the couch, Emma curled against Sarah's side, both of them watching the tree lights blink on and off in the darkened room. Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, and the day after that even more, but tonight, right now, they had this moment. They had each other and a Christmas tree and the belief that good things could still happen. "Mom," Emma's voice was drowsy, fatting towards sleep. "Thank you for the most beautiful tree in the world." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. "Thank you for being the best gift I could ever ask for." As Emma drifted off to sleep in her arms, Sarah made a silent promise. Someday, when things were better, when she wasn't counting pennies and choosing between necessities, she would pay forward the kindness of that stranger in the grocery store. She would be someone's angel, someone's unexpected blessing. She would help restore someone else's faith in Christmas magic. But for now, for this moment, she would simply hold her daughter, and the diner was busier than usual the next morning, filled with tourists passing through Creek on their way to visit family for Christmas. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her notepad ready, her smile automatic even though her feet already ached, and her shift had only started an hour ago. Coffee black and the number 3 breakfast special. A businessman at table 6 called out without looking up from his phone. Coming right up, Sarah replied, adding it to her growing list of orders. She'd left Emma at Mrs. earlier than usual, wanting to pick up extra hours before Christmas. Every dollar helped, and with the 50 cents she had left after buying the music box, she needed whatever tips came her way today. The day after Christmas, she'd get her paycheck. Just had to make it until then. The kitchen was hot and loud, the cook shouting orders while the dishwasher clattered behind him. Sarah clipped her order to the wheel and spun it toward the cook, grabbing 2 plates that were already ready for table 4. Order up for table 7, the cook yelled. Sarah delivered the food to table 4, refilled coffee at table 2, cleared plates at table 8, and grabbed the order for table 7 all in what felt like one continuous motion. She'd been working at diner for 3 years, long enough that the rhythm of the work had become second nature. Long enough that she knew every regular customer by name and every tourist would tip based on the speed of service rather than the quality of conversation. "Excuse me, miss." Sarah turned to find an elderly woman at table 5 trying to get her attention. The woman wore an expensive-looking coat and had perfectly styled white hair. Her husband sat across from her, equally well-dressed, reading a menu even though Sarah had seen them at the diner before and knew they always ordered the same thing. "Yes, ma'am, what can I get for you?" The woman smiled warmly. "We're ready to order. I'll have the French toast with fresh fruit, and my husband will have the Western omelet. Would you like coffee or juice with that?" "Coffee for both of us, dear, thank you." Sarah wrote down the order and headed back to the kitchen. The morning rush continued for another 2 hours, barely giving her time to breathe. When things finally slowed down around 10:30, Sarah leaned against the counter, rolling her shoulders to ease the tension. "You look tired," said, coming out from the office. Was the owner, a woman in her 60s who'd run the diner for 30 years. She was fair but tough, expecting hard work but treating her employees with respect. "Just busy morning," Sarah said, straightening up. "Nothing I can't handle." Studied her for a moment. "You picked up extra shifts this week." "Needed to, Christmas and all." Nodded slowly. She'd been around long enough to recognize the signs of someone struggling. "Take your break, and here." She pressed something into Sarah's hand. "Merry Christmas." Sarah looked down to find 2 $20 bills. Her throat tightened. "I can't." "It's a bonus. All the staff are getting something. You've worked hard this year, Sarah. Take it." Sarah wanted to protest, but the truth was she needed it too desperately. The 50 cents in her wallet wasn't going to get them through the next 3 days. "Thank you," she managed. "This means more than you know." "I think I know," said quietly. "I was a single mother once too. It's not easy. Now go take your break before the lunch rush starts." Sarah grabbed her coat and stepped out the back door into the alley behind the diner. The cold air felt good against her flushed face. She leaned against the brick wall, holding the $40 had given her, adding it mentally to her resources. $40.50 until payday. Enough for gas, enough for a few groceries if they ran low, enough for a small cushion against disaster. She thought about the stranger in the grocery store again, the man who'd insisted she'd dropped $50. In the span of 2 days, she'd received $90 in unexpected kindness. It felt like a miracle, like the universe was trying to tell her something about faith and perseverance and human goodness. A sound made her look up. A young man was sitting on the steps of the building next door, his head in his hands. He wore a thin jacket inadequate for the December cold, and his shoulders shook in a way that suggested crying. Sarah hesitated. She had maybe 10 minutes left of her break, and she should probably spend it sitting down and resting her feet. But something about the young man's posture, the absolute dejection in the curve of his spine, made her walk over. "Hey," she said softly, "are you okay?" The young man looked up, quickly wiping his eyes. He couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with shaggy brown hair and a scraggly attempt at a beard. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face blotchy from crying. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, his voice rough. "Sorry." Sarah sat down on the steps next to him, ignoring the cold concrete through her uniform. "You don't look fine. I'm Sarah. I work at the diner." She gestured towards. The young man sniffed and wiped his nose with his sleeve. I was supposed to start a job here in town, but the company went under before I even had my first day. Drove all the way from Tennessee with everything I owned in my car, and now I'm stuck here with no job and no money and no way to get back home." Sarah's heart sank. She recognized that particular brand of desperation, the feeling of being trapped by circumstances beyond your control. "Do you have family back in Tennessee?" "My mom and my little brother. Mom's sick and's only 16. I was supposed to send money home to help with her medical bills and his school expenses. That's why I took the job here in the first place. Better pay than anything I could find back home." He laughed bitterly. "Guess that worked out great." "Have you tried other places in town?" Sarah asked. "Sis always looking for dishwashers. It's not glamorous, but it's something." Shook his head. "I already asked. They need someone long-term, and I don't even know if I can afford to stay in town long enough to make it worthwhile. I've got maybe $30 to my name, and that's got to cover gas to get home and food until I figure something else out." Sarah looked at this young man, barely more than a kid really, who'd driven hundreds of miles chasing an opportunity that had evaporated before he could grasp it. She thought about her own struggles, about Emma asking if was coming, about all the times she'd felt crushed under the weight of trying to survive. Then she thought about the stranger in the grocery store, about's unexpected bonus, about the chain of kindness that had brought light into her dark December. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah pulled out one of the $20 bills had given her. "Here," she said, pressing it into his hand. "It's not much, but it'll help you get home." Stared at the money, then at Sarah. "I can't take this. You don't even know me." "Someone helped me yesterday," Sarah said simply. "Now I'm helping you. That's how it works." "But you work at a diner. You probably need this money." Sarah stood up, brushing off her uniform. "I need to believe that people help each other. I need to believe that kindness matters. So please take it. Get home to your mom and your brother. Take care of them." Stood too, still clutching the $20. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different. "Thank you. God, thank you so much. I don't know how to." "You don't have to say anything," Sarah interrupted. "Just pay it forward someday when you can. That's all I ask." She walked back into the diner, leaving standing in the alley. Her break was over and she had tables waiting. As she tied her apron back on, Sarah caught her reflection in the metal napkin dispenser. She looked tired, her hair escaping from its ponytail, her face worn, but her eyes looked different somehow. Lighter. The lunch rush was even busier than the breakfast shift, and Sarah didn't have time to think about anything except orders and refills and keeping track of who needed their check. It wasn't until mid-afternoon, during the lull before the early dinner crowd, that she had a chance to count her tips. $73, better than usual probably because of the holiday travelers. Combined with the remaining 20 from and her 50 cents, she had $93.50 to get through the next 3 days. More than enough, actually. Plenty for gas and groceries and even a little left over. Came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sarah, you got a minute?" "Sure." Sarah followed into the small office, wondering if she'd done something wrong. Sat down behind her cluttered desk and gestured for Sarah to take the other chair. "I've been thinking. You've been here 3 years, never missed a shift, never complained, always willing to help, and I know you're raising your daughter on your own." Sarah nodded, unsure where this was going. "How would you feel about being assistant manager?" Continued. "It would mean more responsibility, having to open some mornings and close some nights. But it would also mean a raise. $3 more per hour, plus you get a cut of the monthly profits. Nothing huge, but steady." Sarah's mind raced, calculating. $3 more per hour, working roughly 35 hours a week. That was an extra $400 a month. $400 that could go toward rent, toward food, toward giving Emma a better life. Yes," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes, I'd love that opportunity, thank you." Smiled. "You've earned it. We'll make it official after New Year's, give you time to train on the management side of things. But consider this your Christmas present from me." Sarah left the office feeling like she was floating. In the span of 2 days, she'd gone from counting pennies and despairing over Christmas to having unexpected money, and now a promotion that would change their financial situation significantly. It wasn't wealth, not by any stretch, but it was stability. It was hope. When Sarah picked up Emma from Mrs. that evening, Emma was bubbling with excitement about something Mrs. had taught her how to make paper snowflakes. The elderly woman's apartment was covered in white paper cutouts, hanging from the ceiling and taped to the windows. "Look, Mom," Emma held up a snowflake with an intricate pattern. "Mrs. showed me how to fold the paper just right and then cut it. Each one is different, just like real snowflakes." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, hugging her daughter. "Did you thank Mrs.?" "I did, and I made her a special snowflake for her Christmas tree." Mrs. appeared from the kitchen, moving slowly with her cane. "She's a wonderful child, Sarah, so patient and creative. We had a lovely day." Sarah paid Mrs. her usual fee, then added an extra $10. "For Christmas," she said when Mrs. tried to protest. "You've been so good to us." Walking home in the cold evening air, Emma chattering about snowflakes and Christmas, Sarah felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced in years. The struggles weren't over. There would be more hard months, more difficult decisions, more times when money was tight. But right now, in this moment, they had enough. They had Christmas. They had each other. Their small apartment felt warmer somehow when they walked in, even though the radiator was making its usual clanking sounds. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its lights reflecting off Emma's paper snowflakes that Sarah helped her tape to the windows. "Can we have hot chocolate?" Emma asked. Sarah checked the kitchen cabinet. She had one packet of cocoa mix left, saved for a special occasion. "Sure, let's make it fancy." They heated milk on the stove instead of using water, and Sarah added a tiny bit of vanilla extract she'd been hoarding. She didn't have whipped cream or marshmallows, but she found some cinnamon to sprinkle on top. They sat at their small kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm mugs, and Emma told her about everything she and Mrs. had talked about. "She told me about Christmas in China when she was little," Emma said. "They didn't celebrate it the same way we do, but she said they would light lanterns and her grandmother would tell stories. Mrs. misses her grandmother a lot." "I'm sure she does," Sarah said softly. "Mrs. doesn't have any family here, does she?" Emma shook her head. "She said everyone is back in China and she's too old to travel there now. I told her she could share our Christmas if she wants." Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. "That was very kind of you. Maybe we can invite her over for Christmas dinner." "Really?" Emma's face lit up. "That would be so fun. We could make her a special snowflake and everything." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table working on a budget for the new year. With her raise as assistant manager, she could start saving a little each month. Maybe in 6 months, they could afford to move to a better apartment. Maybe she could start putting money aside for Emma's future, for college or whatever dreams her daughter would chase. She thought about the chain of events that had led here, the stranger in the grocery store, his bonus and job offer, even giving $20 to, which had felt scary in the moment but right in her heart. Each act of kindness, received and given, had led to this moment of possibility. Sarah pulled out a piece of paper and started writing a letter she would probably never send, but needed to write anyway. "To the man in the grocery store, I don't know your name and I'll probably never see you again. But I want you to know that your kindness changed everything. Not just because of the money, though that helped more than you can imagine, but because you reminded me that there's still good in the world. You reminded me to have faith." She paused, pen hovering over the paper. "I gave $20 of what you gave me to a young man who needed to get home to his family. I hope that's okay. I hope that's what you would have wanted. And I promise that as soon as I'm able, I'll keep paying it forward. I'll be someone's unexpected blessing, just like you were mine." Sarah folded the letter and tucked it into her wallet, a reminder of this turning point in her life. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. She had one more shift at the diner, and then she'd have 2 days off to spend with Emma. They'd have their simple Christmas, and it would be perfect because they'd be together. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Sarah woke early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the sun rise over creek. The town looked peaceful in the early light, smoke curling from chimneys, Christmas lights still glowing in windows even as dawn broke. Emma padded out in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is it Christmas yet?" "Tomorrow," Sarah said, pulling her daughter onto her lap. One more day. I can't wait, Emma said, snuggling close. This is going to be the best Christmas ever. Sarah kissed the top of her head. I think you might be right. At the diner, the day was steady but not overwhelming. People seemed more relaxed, the stress of last-minute shopping finally over. Sarah moved through her shift with an ease that came from knowing this was her last day of work before a break, before Christmas morning with her daughter. The elderly couple from yesterday came in again, taking the same table. Sarah brought them coffee without being asked and took their order, the same as yesterday, French toast and Western omelet. You're working on Christmas Eve? The woman asked, her tone sympathetic. Just today, Sarah said. Tomorrow I'm off with my daughter. How old is your daughter? 7, her name's Emma. The woman smiled. What a lovely age, still believing in magic. And she is, Sarah agreed, and I'm doing everything I can to keep that magic alive. Something in her voice must have conveyed more than she intended, because the woman's expression softened even further. I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job. Being a parent is the hardest and most important work there is. After Sarah brought them their food and moved on to other tables, she saw the woman and her husband in quiet conversation, their heads bent together. When they finished eating and Sarah brought them their check, the woman tucked something into Sarah's apron pocket. Merry Christmas, dear, she said. You take care of that little girl. Sarah didn't look until after they'd left, until she was clearing their table and found their tip. $100 in crisp $20 bills and a note written on the receipt. For Emma's Christmas, keep believing in magic. Sarah had to step into the walk-in cooler for a moment, pretending to need supplies while she fought back tears. $100. Combined with what she already had, it was more money than she'd held at one time in months. And the note, that simple message about believing in magic, struck something deep in her heart. When her shift ended, called her into the office again. I wanted to give you this before you leave. She handed Sarah an envelope. Your holiday bonus. All the staff get one, but as the new assistant manager, yours is a bit more. Sarah opened the envelope to find $200 in cash. She looked up speechless. You've been solid as a rock this year, said. I know things haven't been easy for you, and I admire how you keep showing up, keep doing good work, keep being kind to everyone even when you're probably exhausted. That deserves recognition. I don't know what to say. Say you'll have a wonderful Christmas with your daughter. Say you'll come back after the holiday ready to learn the management ropes. That's all I need to hear. Sarah nodded, clutching the envelope. I will, thank you for everything. Walking to her car in the late afternoon light, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the generosity she'd experienced over the past few days. From $50 from a stranger to bonus and promotion to the elderly couple's gift, it was as if the universe had decided to pour blessings into her life all at once. She picked up Emma from Mrs. and invited the elderly woman to join them for Christmas dinner the next day. Mrs.'s eyes filled with tears of gratitude, and she accepted immediately. I'll bring dumplings, Mrs. insisted. I have the ingredients and I'll make them fresh tomorrow morning. That sounds perfect, Sarah said, meaning it. Christmas dinner would be modest, but it would be shared with someone who needed family as much as they needed her. That evening, Sarah and Emma made cookies using a sugar cookie recipe Sarah remembered from her own childhood. They didn't have cookie cutters, so they shaped them by hand wonky Christmas trees and lopsided stars and circles that were supposed to be ornaments. Emma decorated them with a simple frosting Sarah made from powdered sugar and milk, adding food coloring they'd had since last year. These are the best cookies ever, Emma declared, sneaking bites of dough when she thought Sarah wasn't looking. They wrapped 3 of the best cookies in plastic wrap along with a note Emma wrote in careful 7-year-old handwriting. Dear, thank you for coming. We left you cookies. Love, Emma. P.S. Mom says you're really nice. After Emma was asleep that night, Sarah arranged the presents under the tree one more time, making sure everything looked perfect. She'd used some of the money from the elderly couple to buy 2 more gifts that afternoon, a set of watercolor paints Emma had mentioned wanting, and a warm winter coat that was on clearance at the thrift store, barely worn and in Emma's size. She set out the cookies and the note on the kitchen table, along with a carrot for the reindeer that she'd saved from their groceries. She'd take a bite of the cookie and the carrot before bed, leave crumbs, make it real. Sarah stood in the living room, looking at their Christmas tree with its mismatched ornaments and cheerful lights, at the presents wrapped in newspaper comics and tied with ribbons she'd salvaged from previous years. She thought about how terrified she'd been just a few days ago, how certain she'd been that Christmas would be a disappointment. Instead, it had become something else entirely. A lesson in kindness and faith and the way small acts of generosity could ripple outward, creating waves of change that touched lives in unexpected ways. Sarah made herself a cup of tea and curled up on the couch, allowing herself to simply enjoy the moment. Tomorrow would be Christmas. Emma would wake up excited and surprised. Mrs. would join the Christmas morning arrived with pale winter sunlight streaming through the windows of their small apartment. Sarah woke to the sound of Emma's excited gasp from the living room. She smiled, pulling on her robe, and padded out to find her daughter standing frozen in the doorway, eyes wide with wonder. "Mom," Emma whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make everything disappear. He really came. The tree looked magical in the morning light, the presents underneath seeming more abundant than Sarah remembered arranging them the night before. Emma's face glowed with pure joy, and Sarah felt her heart might burst from the simple happiness of this moment. "Of course he came," Sarah said, kneeling down beside Emma. "I told you he would." Emma ran to the kitchen table where the cookies and carrot had been left out. "Look, he ate the cookies, and the reindeer ate the carrot." She picked up the note she'd written, which now had a response written on the back in handwriting Sarah didn't recognize. Her breath caught in her throat. "What does it say?" Sarah asked, confused. She hadn't written anything on the note. Emma read slowly, sounding out the words. "Dear Emma, thank you for the cookies. They were delicious. You and your mom are very special people. Keep being kind and believing in magic. Love." Sarah stared at the note, her mind racing. She hadn't written that. She was certain she hadn't. Had Emma done it herself somehow? But the handwriting was too mature, too steady. And Emma had been asleep all night, Sarah was sure of it. A chill ran down her spine, but not from fear, from something else, something inexplicable. "Can I open presents now?" Emma asked, already moving toward the tree. "Let me get the camera first," Sarah said, shaking off her confusion. She grabbed her old phone, wanting to capture every moment. Emma opened her gifts one at a time, savoring each one. The stuffed penguin was immediately named Snowball. The puzzle was declared perfect. The hair ribbons were tried on immediately. The book was clutched to her chest with promises to read it that very day. The watercolor paints made Emma squeal with delight, and the winter coat, when she tried it on, fit perfectly. "This is the best Christmas ever," Emma said, surrounded by wrapping paper and new treasures. "Brought everything I wanted and more." Sarah opened her modest gift from Emma, a drawing her daughter had made at Mrs. and wrapped in tissue paper. It showed the two of them standing in front of a Christmas tree, holding hands, with the words "Best Mom Ever" written in crayon across the top. "It's perfect," Sarah said, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "You're the best gift I could ever have." They spent the morning playing with Emma's new things, the puzzle spread out on the living room floor, Snowball the penguin getting introduced to Emma's other stuffed animals. Sarah made pancakes for breakfast, using the last of their pancake mix but not caring because it was Christmas. Around 11, Mrs. arrived carrying a large container of dumplings and a small wrapped package. She dressed in her best clothes, a silk blouse and pressed slacks, and her white hair was carefully styled. "Merry Christmas," she said, her accent still thick even after decades in America. "I bring traditional dumplings, my grandmother's recipe." "They smell amazing," Sarah said, taking the container. "Please come in, make yourself at home." Mrs. handed the wrapped package to Emma. "For you, sweet girl, something special." Emma carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a beautiful jade bracelet, delicate and clearly valuable. "Mrs., this is too much," Sarah started to protest. Mrs. held up a hand. "It was my daughter's. She would want Emma to have it. I have no one else to give it to, and Emma is like granddaughter to me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She knew Mrs.'s daughter had died young, knew the elderly woman carried that grief even decades later. "We're honored," Sarah said softly. "Emma will treasure it always." Emma hugged Mrs. carefully, mindful of the older woman's fragility. "Thank you. I'll take really good care of it." They spent the afternoon together, the three of them. Mrs. told stories about her childhood in China, about festivals and traditions. Emma showed her all the presents had brought. Sarah prepared their Christmas dinner, the small chicken she'd bought, the roasted potatoes and carrots, simple but made with care. The dumplings Mrs. had brought were incredible. filled with pork and vegetables and wrapped with expert precision. She taught Emma how to hold them properly with chopsticks, laughing gently when Emma kept dropping them. "Practice," Mrs. said. "Everything good takes practice." They ate at the small kitchen table, crowded but comfortable, sharing food and stories and laughter. It wasn't the grand Christmas Sarah had sometimes imagined, but it was something better. It was real. It was filled with love. After dinner, Emma performed an impromptu play for them using her stuffed animals, making up an elaborate story about Snowball the penguin going on adventures with her reindeer friend. Mrs. applauded enthusiastically, and Sarah laughed until her sides hurt. As the afternoon faded into evening, Mrs. prepared to leave. "Thank you for including Old Woman in your Christmas," she said to Sarah. "It means more than you know." "Thank you for being part of our family," Sarah replied, meaning every word. After Mrs. left, Sarah and Emma curled up on the couch to watch a Christmas movie on TV. Emma fell asleep halfway through, exhausted from excitement, her head on Sarah's lap. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair gently, watching the TV without really seeing it, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few days. The kindness of strangers, the generosity of friends, the way darkness had been pushed back by small acts of goodness. She thought about the note from, still unable to explain it, but deciding that some mysteries were okay to leave unsolved. Her phone buzzed with a text. Sarah carefully reached for it without disturbing Emma. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "This is the guy from the alley. I made it home safe. Wanted to say thanks again. You saved my life, spending Christmas with my mom and brother because of you. I won't forget it." Sarah smiled, typing back a quick response. "Merry Christmas. Take care of your family." Another text came through, this time from, "Hope you're having a wonderful Christmas. See you the day after tomorrow. Ready to teach you everything about managing this crazy place." Sarah replied with thanks and good wishes, then set her phone aside. Emma stirred in her sleep, and Sarah adjusted her position to be more comfortable for both of them. The Christmas tree lights blinked steadily in the corner, and Sarah found herself thinking about the man from the grocery store again. She wondered if he knew the chain reaction his kindness had set off. That $50 hadn't just bought a tree and gifts. It had bought hope. It had reminded her that the world still held good people, that magic existed in human compassion. And she'd passed it on. $20 to extra money to Mrs., the determination to keep spreading kindness wherever she could. It was a chain that would continue, rippling outward in ways she might never fully know. Sarah's eyes grew heavy, and she let herself drift toward sleep, Emma warm and safe in her arms, their tiny apartment feeling like the richest place in the world. She woke sometime later to darkness outside and Emma shaking her shoulder gently. "Mom, there's something on the doorstep." Sarah sat up, confused and still half asleep. "What?" "I heard a noise and looked out the window. There's a box outside our door." Sarah stood, stretching her stiff muscles, and went to the door. Sure enough, a large cardboard box sat on their doormat. She looked up and down the hallway, but no one was there. She brought the box inside, checking for any kind of label or note. Nothing. "What is it?" Emma asked, bouncing with curiosity. Sarah opened the box carefully. Inside were groceries, not just any groceries, but the kind Sarah usually could only dream of buying. A large ham, fresh vegetables, nice bread, real butter, a box of fancy chocolates, expensive coffee, fresh fruit. At the bottom of the box was an envelope. Sarah opened it with shaking hands. Inside was $500 in cash and a note written in the same handwriting that had been on Emma's note. "For a mother who keeps believing, for a daughter who deserves magic, for new beginnings and brighter days ahead. Keep paying it forward. The world needs more people like you." Sarah sank onto the floor, the note clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Emma knelt beside her, looking worried. "Why are you crying, Mom? Is something wrong?" Sarah laughed through her tears, pulling Emma close. "No, baby, nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Everything's so right." "Is this from two?" Emma asked, looking at the box of groceries. Sarah thought about the handwriting on both notes, about the impossibility and wonder of it all. "Maybe," she said softly. "Or maybe it's from one of his helpers, someone who believes in taking care of people who need it." They unpacked the groceries together, Emma exclaiming over each item. Sarah's mind was reeling, trying to understand who could have done this, how they'd known, why they'd chosen to help her family. The man from the grocery store, but how would he know where they lived? But she'd already been so generous. The elderly couple, Mrs. Then she remembered something. The afternoon she'd given money to in the alley, there had been someone else there. She'd seen them out of the corner of her eye, leaving through the back door of the building next to the diner. She'd thought nothing of it at the time, too focused on and his situation. But now she wondered. Had someone been watching? Had they seen her give away money she clearly needed? Had they decided she deserved help because she'd chosen to help someone else? Sarah picked up her phone and texted, "Did you see anyone strange around the diner yesterday? Someone who might have been watching?" His response came a few minutes later. "Funny you should ask. There was a man hanging around yesterday afternoon. Same guy I saw in here last week, sitting alone with coffee for hours. Nice-looking fellow, 50s maybe, asked a lot of questions about the staff." "Why?" Sarah's heart began to race. "What kind of questions?" "Nothing weird, just how long people had worked there if they were good employees. I figured he was thinking about applying for a job. He paid cash and left a big tip. Why? Is everything okay?" Sarah stared at her phone, pieces clicking together. The man from the grocery store. It had to be. He'd given her $50, but he hadn't stopped there. He'd followed up somehow, watched to see what she'd do with it. And when he saw her give money to, when he saw her choose generosity even in her own need, he decided to do more. She texted back, "Everything's more than okay. If you see him again, tell him thank you. Tell him he changed everything." Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, can we have hot chocolate with the fancy chocolates?" Sarah looked at her daughter's eager face, at the box of beautiful groceries, at the $500 that represented security and possibilities. She thought about the chain of kindness that had led here, about the stranger who'd become their guardian angel, about the power of human compassion to transform lives. "Yes," Sarah said, scooping Emma up and spinning her around. "Yes, we can have hot chocolate and fancy chocolates and anything else we want, because this is the most magical Christmas ever." They made hot chocolate with real cocoa powder from the box, topped it with whipped cream that had been included in the groceries, and carefully unwrapped 2 pieces of the fancy chocolate. They sat at the kitchen table, savoring every sip and bite, Emma chattering about how must have the best helpers in the whole world. "Do you think helpers are everywhere?" Emma asked. "Like, could anyone be one?" Sarah thought about it carefully. "I think anyone can choose to be a helper. Anyone can choose to be kind, to look out for people who need it, to spread magic in the world. You don't need special powers or a red suit. You just need a good heart." "Like you," Emma said simply. "You're one of helpers." Sarah felt tears threaten again. "I try to be, and you know what? So are you. The way you're kind to Mrs., the way you share with other kids, the way you always try to help. You're a helper, too." Emma beamed with pride. They finished their hot chocolate and chocolate in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about Christmas and magic, and the mysterious ways goodness found its way into the world. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat down with the $500 spread out on the table in front of her. This money changed everything. Combined with her upcoming raise and the other money she'd received, it meant she could pay their rent ahead for 2 months. She could afford to fix the car's brakes that had been worrying her. She could buy Emma new shoes that actually fit and some winter clothes that weren't from the thrift store. She could breathe. But more than the practical implications, the money represented something bigger. It represented faith. The stranger from the grocery store had faith that she would use it wisely, that she would pay it forward, that she was worth investing in, and she would prove him right. Sarah pulled out a notebook and started making a list. Not just a budget for herself, but a plan for how she would help others once she was more stable. She'd donate to the food bank every month. She'd leave extra tips for servers who looked like they were struggling. She'd look for opportunities to be someone's unexpected blessing, just as she'd been blessed. She wrote at the top of the page, "Remember where you came from, remember who helped you, pass it on." The next morning, Emma woke up early again, still excited from Christmas. They had leftover dumplings for breakfast and played with the watercolor paints, making cheerful, messy pictures to hang on the refrigerator. Sarah's phone rang, and she answered to find on the other end. "Hey, I know you're off today, but I wanted to let you know. That man came by again this morning, the one I mentioned. He asked about you specifically, wanted to know if you were doing okay. I told him you seemed happy yesterday. He smiled and said good and left. Thought you should know." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. "Did he leave a name?" "No, but he left another big tip and said to tell you keep believing, whatever that means." After hanging up, Sarah stood at the window, looking out at Creek. Somewhere in this town, maybe driving through on his way somewhere else, was a man who decided to be his helper. A man who'd seen a struggling mother and daughter and chosen to restore their faith in Christmas magic. She hoped she'd see him again someday, hoped she'd get a chance to thank him properly, to tell him how much his kindness had meant. But even if she never did, she'd honor his gift by passing it forward, by being for someone else what he'd been for her. Emma came to stand beside her, pressing her face against the window. "What are you looking at?" "Just the town," Sarah said, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Thinking about how many good people there are in the world, how many helpers has." "I can see Mrs. Swindow from here," Emma said, pointing. "Maybe we should make her some hot chocolate later." "That's a wonderful idea," Sarah said, her heart full. This was what it meant to pay it forward. This was how kindness. Emma was learning, was growing into someone who thought about others, who wanted to spread joy. They spent the rest of the day in simple contentment. They worked on Emma's puzzle together. They read the new book, taking turns reading pages out loud. They tried on Emma's new coat again and admired how warm it was. They made paper snowflakes to add to the ones already decorating their windows. In the evening, they did take hot chocolate to Mrs., who invited them in to see her small Christmas tree, decorated with ornaments she'd collected over decades in America. Each one had a story, and she shared them generously, giving Emma glimpses into a life that had spanned continents and decades. Walking back to their own apartment, Emma reached up to take Sarah's hand. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart. This was the best Christmas ever, even better than I dreamed." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "It really was, wasn't it?" That night, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, Emma looked up at her with serious eyes. "When I grow up, I want to be one of his helpers, too. I want to help people like that man helped us." Sarah kissed her forehead. "You already are a helper, baby, and I know you'll keep being one your whole life. That's the best gift you could ever give the world." Emma snuggled under her covers, hugging Snowball the penguin close. "Maybe someday we'll meet him again, the man from the store, and we can thank him." "Maybe we will," Sarah agreed, though she suspected the man preferred to remain anonymous, preferred to be an invisible force for good rather than someone seeking recognition. After Emma fell asleep, Sarah stood in the doorway of her daughter's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. She thought about all the ways their lives might have gone differently if that stranger hadn't approached them in the grocery store. If he'd walked past, minded his own business, let them struggle alone. But he hadn't. He'd chosen compassion. He'd chosen to act. And in doing so, he'd set off a chain reaction of kindness that had transformed not just their Christmas, but their entire future. Sarah walked to the living room and stood before their Christmas tree, its lights still glowing cheerfully. She thought about the note about the mysterious delivery of groceries and money, about all the small miracles that had come together to create this magical holiday. She pulled out her phone and opened a new text message. She didn't have the stranger's number, would probably never have a way to contact him directly. But she wrote the message anyway, putting into words what was in her heart. "To the man who played for my family, you gave us more than money. You gave us hope. You reminded us that the world is full of good people, that kindness matters, that magic exists in human compassion. You saved our Christmas and changed our lives. I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life paying forward what you gave us. I will be someone's unexpected blessing, someone's reason to believe in goodness. Thank you for being our angel. Thank you for teaching my daughter that helpers are real and everywhere. We will never forget you." She saved the message in her phone, a letter that might never be sent but needed to be written. Then she settled onto the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and let herself simply feel grateful. Creek was quiet outside their window, the town settled in for the night after Christmas. But inside their small apartment, something had shifted. They were no longer just surviving. They were beginning to thrive. They had security, hope, and a plan for a better future. They had each other, and they had the knowledge that they were part of a larger web of human kindness. Sarah's eyes grew heavy, and she let herself drift toward sleep with a smile on her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, on this perfect Christmas night, all was well. She dreamed of strangers with kind eyes, of $50 bills that into 500, of notes written in mysterious handwriting. She dreamed of Emma growing up to be one of his helpers, spreading joy and compassion wherever she went. She dreamed of a future where kindness was the currency that mattered most. And somewhere in Creek, or perhaps already moving on to another town, another family in need, a man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes smiled, knowing he'd made a difference. Knowing that the simple act of helping a struggling mother and daughter had rippled outward, creating waves of kindness that would continue long after he was gone. Because that's how it works. One person choosing compassion, one moment of generosity, one decision to be someone's unexpected blessing. And the world becomes a little bit brighter, a little bit better, a little bit more magical. That's what Sarah learned that Christmas. That's what Emma would carry with her forever. That's what the stranger in the grocery store already knew. Helpers are real. They're everywhere. They're anyone who chooses to make the world a better place through simple acts of kindness. They're mothers working double shifts to give their children a good life. They're strangers who press money into someone's hand and insist they dropped it. They're elderly women sharing dumplings and jade bracelets. They're young people giving away what little they have to help someone in greater need. Helpers are all of us. Whenever we choose love over indifference, generosity over selfishness, hope over despair. And this Christmas, in a small town called Creek, in a tiny apartment decorated with homemade snowflakes and a modest tree, that truth had become real for Sarah and Emma Mitchell. They'd experienced the magic of human kindness, and they'd learned the most important lesson of all. When someone asks, "Is not coming this year?" the answer is always yes, because comes in many forms. He comes as a stranger in a grocery store, as a boss offering a promotion, as an elderly woman sharing her culture, as an anonymous benefactor leaving groceries on a doorstep, as anyone who chooses to be light in someone else's darkness. This year came, and Sarah and Emma would spend the rest of their lives making sure he kept coming for others who needed him, carrying forward the legacy of kindness that had saved their Christmas and restored their faith in the goodness of humanity. The Christmas tree lights blinked steadily through the night, keeping watch over a family that had discovered the true meaning of the season. Not presents under a tree or elaborate decorations, not expensive gifts or perfect dinners, but love, compassion, and the unshakable belief that we are all responsible for taking care of each other. That was the gift the stranger had truly given them, and it was a gift Sarah and Emma would treasure, protect, and pass on for the rest of their lives. Because that's what you do with magic. You keep it alive, you share it, you make sure it never dies. And somewhere in the darkness of that Christmas night, if you listened carefully, you might have heard the sound of sleigh bells ringing, of reindeer hooves on rooftops, of a jolly laugh echoing across the town. Or maybe it was just the wind. But Sarah and Emma knew better. They knew magic when they experienced it. They knew helpers when they met them. They knew that this Christmas and every Christmas to come would be filled with the warmth of knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were part of the great chain of human kindness, and that was the greatest gift of all them for dinner. They would have a day of peace and joy and celebration. And beyond that, the future looked brighter than it had in years. A better job, more money, the ability to provide more stability for Emma. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a new beginning. It was hope made tangible for the small miracles that had brought them here, to this quiet night with a glowing tree and gifts wrapped in newspaper, and the promise of Christmas morning just days away.